Oregon versus Indiana this weekend. Both coming off, or Oregon at least. I think Indiana's coming off a bye week as well, if I'm not mistaken here. But
I believe so.
Both teams coming off two performances. Indiana's over Illinois, Oregon's over Penn State. A lot of traction going in to this one. Oregon is the favorite over on FanDuel when you go and look at those odds. But, Joe, when you look at Oregon versus Indiana and you preview this game, how do you see it playing out?
Oregon on FanDuel is favored at -7.5, by the way. For
opened up at 10.5. Hold on. I tweeted this last week. Open up. FanDuel did one game, week 7 matchup. It was this one. The line has moved 3 points. That's significant. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, very, very interesting, and it should provide a little bit of juice for Oregon supporters for wanting to bet on them. Blake, I think that first and foremost, it's very important that this game is played in Autzen. I think that this is huge for Oregon having that home environment to play to their strength. And the last time that we watched them have a Midwestern team come into that environment, it was when Ohio State stepped in, and the noise seemingly got to Ohio State in the very late stages of that game. Blake, this Oregon team, to me, has another opportunity to really prove why they're one of the top 3 teams in the country alongside Miami and Ohio State. The biggest challenge to start off with me that I want to find out is how they're going to handle facing off with a potent passing attack like Fernando Mendoza, Omar Cooper, and Elijah Surratt, because they were not challenged. Their secondary was not challenged when they faced off with Penn State. But one thing that we do know for certain is that Oregon starts fast, and that is going to give them a tremendous advantage. They have a plus 44-point differential in the first quarter of all of their games this season. And whoever can strike first with a big play, I think, is going to give themselves a quick early edge towards a game that is going to be extremely exciting to watch.
Autzen is arguably one of, if not the, I'm not going to say it's the, but by far one of the hardest places to play and come out with a win. It's not even debatable. Like you mentioned, you saw Ohio State go in there last year, and Joe, that place was absolutely rocking. It's going to be rocking again this weekend. But you brought up Indiana and what they needed to do. What is the quickest way to keep that noise down? Joe, you got to establish a run game up front, and you got to be very personable about it. The question I have, Joe, and Oregon fans are going to yell at me. By the way, Oregon's my top team, by the way, in my power rankings. Just throwing that out there before you say I hate you, because I don't.
Okay.
Indiana is 5th in the country in rushing. They've had multitudes of 300-yard-plus rushing games against Illinois, against all the other teams they played. Blake, they didn't play anybody. You're right. How do they look in this one? And the second question I ask, Joe, if there is a chink that I want to see Oregon answer, is their run defense. Well, Blake, they've been fine. I agree. They've actually been more than fine. But, Joe, they're 38th in the country in rushing. You want to get that crowd noise down early, convert easy third downs. When I look at Indiana, by the way, on third down offense, they're 4th in the country. Joe, over half, 65% of their third down conversions is coming on the ground, more or less than what people believe of what Fernando Mendoza and company have been doing. But the question is, listen, you went up against Illinois. It was a great test, and you answered that call. You played some opponents earlier in the year that, quite frankly, did not have the talent to match up with you. Joe, my question for Indiana coming into this one is, can you match what they're going to do to you up front on both lines of scrimmage that have been very dominant in Oregon?
I think one thing that's very intriguing for this game is that just pulling up some of their more advanced stats, both these teams are incredibly evenly matched in terms of EPA per drop back. We've got Oregon, who's 10th, and Indiana's defense is 22nd, so there's not much separation. EPA per rush, we've seen Oregon have a lot of production. They're 10th in the country, while Indiana's defense against them is in the top 25. We're seeing that both of these teams are operating on just this ridiculous trajectory for how productive they've been. One thing that I give Indiana a lot of credit for is how underrated they are defensively. We saw the way that Indiana's offense was able to take advantage of Illinois' secondary when it was banged up, but not a lot of people talked about how smothering Indiana's defense was against Illinois. They are the number one team in the country in havoc rate, which measures tackles for loss, turnovers, those types of plays that are registered. They are the best team in the country right now at creating those opportunities. Meanwhile, Oregon is 90th. So they have not really been having those game-shifting types of plays defensively. The other thing about Indiana that really intrigues me is, one, their leading tacklers, their best defensive players, are all seniors and juniors. That gives them an advantage in this area, that veteran leadership that they're bringing to the table. They're also, this is a pretty crazy stat, they have only allowed 3 red zone trips to opponents this season. So they're not really letting many teams get very far down.
And what's so funny about that, both of them have allowed touchdowns, 3 apiece. They're both tied at 127th in red zone defense.
Yeah. Wait, you're saying that they've given up conversions when teams have gone to the red zone?
Both Indiana and Oregon have allowed 3 touchdowns in the red zone. 3. They're both tied at 127th in red zone.
Because of the percentage that they've given up.
Because of the percentage of it being 100%, they're tied for dead last. Here's the problem with that. Between the both of them through 7 weeks, they only have 6 red zone appearances between the defense combined. That's the issue here. It's not because they're bad, because you look at it, you talked about their defense. One's 3rd in the country in scoring defense. The other is tied for 6th. So if that's the worst thing they do,
right,
somebody's got to get to the red zone and let them convert.
Speaking of red zone efficiency, this was another insane stat for Oregon. They're 100% this year in the red zone. 23 possessions that they've reached there. So there's going to be a little bit of a breaking point. If we're talking, though, just like very directly on like how I think
they're first. They're number 1 in the country, right?
Yeah, how this game is going to actually unfold. You've got 2 tremendous quarterbacks, and I'm going to really focus on the 2 of them because both teams have solid offensive linemen. They've got great receivers. They've got good running backs they can lean on. They've got underrated defensive players that are making a lot of big plays. But this game is going to be defined by Dante Moore versus Fernando Mendoza. And as we saw when Dante Moore had his last quarterback battle against Drew Aller, he prevailed. He survived. He was the one who made the big plays every single time that he was called upon and needed to do so. And Mendoza was awesome against Illinois, struggled a tiny bit against Iowa. Is that version of him against Illinois going to be the one that shows up? I have a high aspirations, very, very high aspirations for what Mendoza does. I really believe that he is going to be a top 10 pick, just like if Dante Moore were to declare that he will also be a top 10 pick. I, first and foremost, as an enjoyer of good football, am so geeked up on the fact that we get to watch these 2 dudes go after one another and potentially go shot for shot.
See, you bring up the quarterbacks, and I'm glad that you did, because I look, at Indiana, and I look at their passing defense. They're 7th in the country in pass defense and passing yards allowed. My question is, name a team that could even remotely test that. I don't think that there's a team that remotely comes close to having athletes like Sadiq, DeCorian Moore. They get Hill involved in the run game out of the backfield, who I think is a problem. I don't know. I really don't know if Indiana, and I mean this, has the level of speed that can combat what Oregon's about to throw at them. Now, they don't.
No, I disagree. I mean,
like that. They don't.
I disagree. No. I disagree with that because
of course you disagree. They ain't got that level of speed.
You're completely underrating Indiana's secondary because Indiana's secondary has some of the best defensive backs in the country.
Okay, name a team that's been able to go up and match up against that secondary that can throw the ball like what they're about to do.
But that just because they haven't been challenged by anyone doesn't mean that they're not good. I will put a lot of faith in Amari Farrell and D'Angelo Pons and what they're going to be able to accomplish against this unit. I wouldn't discount them. They're one of those talented secondaries in college football.
And I'm going to lean on Sadiq, and I'm going to lean on DeCorian Moore in that wide receiver room because, listen, I saw them go up against a really talented secondary and have a massive amounts of success. So before we even go there, I get what you're saying. So when I look at Indiana, it's not a question of if, it's really a question of can you? Because I think that you have not, even though you've been fantastic, you made it to a playoff, whatever. I don't think that you've gotten that signature win to show the country that we're actually here. Their playoff run a year ago was people, hold on. Last year was everybody wondering if they deserved to be in. You beat Michigan. But then when you went up against the ranked teams that you played, whether it be Notre Dame, Ohio State, you got pushed around up front. And that is a bottom line fact. Joe, when I think of a signature win, I don't know if there would be another one than going on the road to the last year's Big Ten champion and beating them. I got to be real with you. I think Dante Moore in this wide receiver room is about to show up and show out. I think Will Stein is going to have so many different things that he's going to throw at them that they're just not going to be ready for. And I saw a very young unit hit a stride in the second half versus Penn State and shell shock them. I'm telling you, do not sleep on the corner.
I'm not sleeping on him, Blake. But here's the thing that you're like completely again. We're overlooking the talent that Indiana has in their secondary, and I would argue Indiana's winning against Illinois is actually possibly more impressive than the Penn State victory at this current moment because Penn State is a complete and utter mess right now. Illinois is still ranked right now.
They won't be long. They won't be for long.
I don't know about that.
Okay, so then you have them beating Ohio State. Else, all of y'all.
No. That's not what I said. Just because they lose to Ohio State does not mean they end up getting taken out of the rankings. You're almost making it seem like I'm framing this as if I'm doubting Oregon. I think Oregon wins this football game, and I'm taking them to win. But I don't think that is where the real challenge.
Okay, well then where's the challenge? Because if they win, there's going to have to be a challenge that Indiana can't overcome. And if it's not in the pass game, then you think that they're going to run all over them, which I don't know if they're going to be able to do because I got to be quite frank with you. On the opposite side of that, I don't know if Oregon is going to have the explosiveness from the run game that many people think that they have. I really think that their biggest strength is starting to find the connection through the pass game that people aren't really talking about enough.
I don't disagree with that. And it was.
So you don't disagree with
me?
Stop.
I don't disagree with that. Dante Moore and Decorium Moore and the passing attack are not important for this matchup. And I'm not saying that they get completely shut down, but the way that I see that this game unfolding, and I think that where success could be found and will be found for Oregon is actually them running the football. You've got a running back room that is averaging 6.8 yards per carry and a running back room that was so talented with Dyer Hill Jr. and Jordan Davidson. Those guys have been so good that it led to Mekhi Hughes requesting his red shirt. You put him in a very awkward position that he decided that he wasn't going to play this year. And I just named two guys that are freshmen that are contributing when you still have Jaden Lamar and Noah Whittington. There is a 4-deep group. I think that the way that they've been able to sneakily build through big rushing plays is where they potentially find that impact because Indiana's secondary, as I'm trying to really harp on here, is super, super underrated. If anything, I think that the way that they were able to move the ball against Indiana's defense, having the solid front seven that they had, is evidence. Or sorry, I'm mixing up. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Is evidence that they're going to end up having success here against Indiana.
Let me flip side of that. Since we talked about one secondary and one pass game unit, I really like the physicality and the physical nature of what Indiana receivers brought against Illinois. However, you got dudes everywhere for Oregon in the secondary. My question is going to be, can Fernando Mendoza hit those big shots like Drew Aller did? Because I think that there was something that did get exposed. You had a blown coverage. It went for a touchdown. It is what it is. Can you hit more of those? I got to see Fernando Mendoza in this wide receiver room go up against that secondary and have success. Joe, you're talking about the fifth secondary in the country in Oregon, who quite honestly has been a no-fly zone. They had one big play. Thieneman comes down with the interception in overtime. I really do wonder if they're going to have massive amounts of success. And I do also wonder, with that being said, can Indiana protect Fernando Mendoza long enough to be able to get the ball downfield and throw the ball downfield? When I talk about, I don't know if Indiana's been challenged to what they're going to be challenged. Well, first off, they haven't. And I think that's just very apparent. But I would heat this thing up this weekend. I would make Fernando very uncomfortable early if I'm Oregon, and I'm going man up on the outside and say, okay, look, early, I'm going to make you beat us. And then if you do, then we'll adjust. But I'm going after Fernando Mendoza like my life depended on it. I think he's going to make a lot of elite throws. I'm not saying he won't. But I got to see this wide receiver room who's very physical and talented with 7-Eleven and the boys, or Waffle House and the boys. I keep calling them 7-Eleven. With Surratt, who I like a lot, I need to see them overcome that. Listen, do I think Indiana has the potential and may be a very good team? Yes. I got to see you go in there and do it first for me. I really do, because I think Illinois, when you lost 4 DBs and you start throwing the ball all over the place, that's good.
But they stopped throwing the ball like a little bit after halftime, and they still beat them.
So I'm sorry, but doing that to Illinois is not the same for what we're about to see.
Obviously, I just don't like you framing it as them. They haven't been tested. Like they haven't
been tested.
They smoked Illinois, and then they
have not been
Iowa on the road.
And to be honest with you, Iowa still doesn't really know how to confidently throw a pass forwards. And
I watched one of the better defenses in college football, and they were still able to.
Joe, I'm sorry.
That game.
No, they're not. No, they're not. Iowa doesn't have a pulse. I'm sorry. No, they're not. They don't have the dudes that Oregon does. No, they don't.
Obviously, that's not what I'm saying here. I think that two things can be true here. We can talk about this matchup and talk about how this game is, but I don't like this framing that Indiana hasn't been tested. This isn't the schedule that they played last year. They have seen more challenging games. Is this the most challenging game that they've played? Yeah. Is it also the most challenging game that Oregon's played? Both apply for both of these teams. It's week 7. Not many teams have played hard parts of their schedule.
I still think going to Happy Valley in a whiteout at night is going to be more difficult than playing at home, but I get what you're saying.
I give Oregon a lot of credit for stepping into that really, really hard environment. But at the current moment, Illinois looks like a better team than Penn State does based on the way that Penn State played against UCLA this past weekend. Is Penn State more talented? Yeah. It's not better coached at the current moment because they've been playing like complete and utter shit over the past 2 weeks. So I just don't like using the framing of those last 2 matchups to define who has been more challenged and who's more prepared for this game. But with that in mind, though, I think that you brought up one other part about this that is very important, and it's very specific in the quarterback battle that we're talking about. You have Cooper and you have Surratt, who are 2 very physical, sturdy receivers who are combined for 53 catches and 820 yards through their 5 games. They're going up against what is a young corner core for this Oregon team. They have been tremendous. They've played very, very well. But as much as we're talking about who's been tested to this point, what receivers really tested this secondary when they played against Penn State? I'm not saying that as a dig. I'm merely pointing out that for some of these things that we deem strengths for both these squads, I think this game allows for us to really define who is the better squad.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I still think Penn State, for what it's worth, there's a couple of things for me that I'm looking at. Let's just agree. You can agree to disagree. It doesn't really matter. I don't know if Indiana can do some of the things that they did to Illinois up front. So that's number one.
I agree.
Okay, that's number one for me. I don't know how the level of speed. I from my eyeballs tell me when I look at Oregon, they have more speed than Indiana. That's what my eyeballs tell me. Now, are there specific players that Indiana has that's got really great speed, elite speed? Yes. I don't know if they have the overall team speed. That's what I see when I watch the film of them. Number 3, I think they're going to heat up Fernando Mendoza. And I really think that they are going to tell him and tell this team, okay, fine, early, throw the ball all over the place and see if you can beat us, because we're not going to let you run the ball. Joe, they've been running the ball for 300 yards a game against some no-name of Kennesaw State. Okay, so sounds good. I think that they have the talent to – I don't like the matchup for Indiana at all. I don't. Because I think the biggest strengths of what Indiana has shown is also the biggest strengths for Oregon. And I think that they're going to outmatch you there. And I got to be real with you. Illinois was a great test, quote unquote, if we're going to go that route to see if you got better up front. When you win these games last year, you got manhandled. And Joe, I got to be real with you. I think it's going to be a little bit like that in the second half, because I think that the depth of Oregon is going to start taking over here, and it's going to start overwhelming them. And I think Fernando is going to have issues in the second half. And I'm not saying they're getting blown out or anything like that, but I do think that this is going to be a pretty convincing win for Oregon.
I think you're like really forcing me to make it seem like I'm completely shitting on Oregon by saying
you hate Oregon.
No. Well, I just realized I was wearing my hat with the Oregon logo on it. Two things here. One, Illinois' front seven was their strength going into that game. Gabe Yakis, Thompson, who is a tremendous defensive tackle. Bielma has built that team up front and in the trenches, and it has always been their biggest strengths. I think that it was telling for your question mark of are they physical enough along their offensive line to challenge opposing teams. I think that they showed that. The way that they were able to pave big lanes in the run game proved that they're going to be better equipped for this game. But with that being said, to cut through, and Indiana fans might be thinking I'm like sitting here projecting some sort of an upset and I'm projecting some sort of a big win. I do think that Oregon is going to win this game. I don't know if they cover the 7.5 on FanDuel. I think that if they win, it would probably be a 7-point victory. I don't love the little hook on there. I think that Indiana is able to challenge, and because they have the receivers that they have in Mendoza, if they go down by multiple scores, there is an opportunity for them to pull back into it. But in games like this, blue chip ratio comes up. Blue chip ratio gets talked about all the time. And it is important when you've got two highly motivated squads that are well coached, that have very unique coaches, that are never going to let their teams sleepwalk through a matchup. And if both teams are evenly prepared, evenly motivated, I give the edge to Dan Lanning being the incredible motivator that he is in getting his team prepared. And I have no doubt that they're going to come out swinging. Like I just talked about how they're dominating right now and how quickly they're putting points on the board with that plus 44 point differential in just the first quarter. The talent separation of all the 5 stars that we've hyped up and that we've talked about for this Oregon team will show up. And that is going to help them win this game. That is going to be the separator between these two squads. So I was merely just trying to defend Indiana because I do not think that this is going to be some sort of dominating loss where, and I know you're not claiming that they're going to get blown out. I think that to say that this is a confident victory for Oregon, I think that might be just a little bit too hasty. I think that Indiana is going to be able to fight and stay close. That's it.
I'm super confident. You know what? Lock of the week.
Okay, now you're just trying to be hurtful. Now you're just trying to be hurtful.
Amari Washington. Massive game this week. Massive game this week. I think he pushes around that interior offensive line for Indiana. All right.
Good player.
Dude, sidebar. Okay, hold on. Pause.
He's one of my favorite players in the country right now. I'm not gonna doubt this.
The defensive line in this upcoming draft is utterly ridiculous.
It's okay.
No, it's not.
There's some good players.
That Reuben Bain, Amari Washington.
Before adding in edge players, I thought you meant defensive tackles. I thought that was.
Oh no, I meant that's why
the defensive tackles are kind of weak. But no, you're right about D line overall.
Good googly moogly.